What's the most dangerous thing you've done without realizing how dangerous it was at the time? When I was 11, I tied sand weights around my feet and hands to walk on the bottom of my pool. I nearly drowned. When I was 9, I tried to put pool floaties on my ankles to see if I could walk on water. Turns out I am not Jesus. My family went on holiday in Australia when we were kids. It was a hot day and we found a really nice beach a bit off the main road with no one else swimming. My sister and I had great fun splashing around in the waves while our parents sunbathed on the shore. When we were done for the afternoon, my mom and I walked down the beach trying to find some toilets. Instead, we found a massive warning sign saying the beach was infested with saltwater crocodiles. We never even saw them, but that was probably why the beach was empty. The general rule is that for every croc you see, there are many more that you don't. When I was 7, I wanted to pretend to be a bus driver for a day. I found an electrical socket under a nice window and proceeded to stick a key in the socket. I burned my nail off and shut the electricity in the house down. My grandmother didn't appreciate this. I'm now 17, and the nail is just beginning to grow back. While we were diving in Indonesia, a friend of mine found a cool-looking snail shell. He swam down to it and picked it up, and noticed a small arm protrude from the shell and wave around. Not wanting to bother the animal further, he put it back down. The snail he picked up was a species of cone snail, and the arm can shoot a wetsuit-piercing dart which will paralyze you, then kill you if you haven't already drowned. My grandma's house has an in-law unit, but it became a storage for the family. My cousin and I, 6 and 10 at that time, decided to explore the unit when I saw a shotgun and some paper targets, around 10 by 10. I told my cousin to hold one of the targets above his head and I pulled the trigger. Thank the gods, the shotgun was empty. How are you not dead? He dead. He wrote that while hanging on heaven's elevator. I know there's a name for this game, but me and the neighbors would stand in the yard with feet shoulder width apart, and throw knives to try to stick it as close to our feet as we could. We were like 13, but for some reason had no concept of it being dangerous in the slightest. I still have all 10 toes, so it turned out alright, I guess. My family and I come home one night and our house smells like gas. Me being the idiot I am, heads into the kitchen. We have a gas stove and I assumed there must be something wrong with the stove, that's why it smells like gas. So I turn the burner on, it lights just fine. Yet as I do this, my family screams at me to stop. I nearly killed myself and my entire family when we suspected a gas leak by lighting a fire. I physically cringed. Jesus. Lol. They probably never let you forget. When I was about 10, I went to the beach and decided to see how far out I could paddle sitting on a rubber ring. I got way out past everyone else to the point where I could barely see my parents, and boats had passed in between me and land. Dad had to borrow a kayak and come and get me, but I didn't realize until I was older how badly that could have gone. Prescribed Ativan, morphine, and Dilaudid. Took too much of each. It felt nice, then I nodded for an unknown amount of time. My ex told me my lips were blue and she thought I had died. Can I get the name of your doctor? Dr. Mantis Tabagan. TLDR, my father burnt down my grandfather's farm. Not me but my father. He grew up on a farm, didn't go to school much because of it being a few hours away. That's Australia for you, so although he was good with his hands, he wasn't the best in judgment or planning. Got some old jerry cans full of fuel and placed them out in field of long dead grass. Got his rifle, used to kill pest animals, and tested his aim on it. He figured that bullets making fuel ignite was bullshit, and even then the fuel won't hurt already dead grass. Turns out he was half right. After dozens of shots he managed to get sparks but the fuel didn't ignite. The fumes did, which in turn ignited the fuel. Caused a fire to break out that burnt most of the grass field, about an acre of pineapples, and a half acre of flowers. Estimated loss of several $1,000s. I don't recall how they put it out. Was about 30 years ago and my grandfather still gets angry on the anniversary of that event. Got a good one for this, was on a volunteer trip on the island of Kaho'olawe in Hawaii. It was heavily bombed as target practice in World War II. The areas we were working in were supposedly cleared of unexploded ordnances. On the second or third day my buddy and I walked a little ways down the beach from the barracks we were housed in, assuming it was safe. We noticed there were these posted signs every 50 yards or so on the high end of the beach, away from the ocean. But they were blank. We ignorantly kept walking a ways until I got curious, walked over to the sign and looked on the other side. Do not go beyond this point, unexploded ordnances. Needless to say, we traced our steps back to camp. Hiked up Preikestolen in Norway. It is basically a 1,500-foot vertical drop. The wind was absolutely insane, blowing towards the mountain. I crawled closer to the edge, but as soon as I got to it, the wind changed from blowing to sucking me down the cliff. I felt my jacket slipping on the rocks. I barely managed to crawl back towards the mountain and just kept way clear from the edge for the rest of the time. Trolltunga is the same story, but it wasn't nearly as dangerous, no wind. When me, my sister, and our cousin were little, one day we made up a game. I'd have to say my sister and I were maybe 6 or 7 and my cousin a couple years older. We had a cardboard box, which was always fun as a little kid, and we had drawn all over it with markers to make it a haunted house. And what is a haunted house without a killer with a knife? So one of us got a big and sharp knife from the kitchen. I guess they were easy to get to. We put the box on its side so 2 people could lay down with their upper bodies inside the box. Whoever was left outside would take the knife and randomly stab through the top of the box. For whatever reason we thought this was so fun. This memory always stands out for me because it's a ducking miracle that none of us were seriously injured. Almost picked up a baby king brown snake when I was younger. I figured because it was a baby it wouldn't be as venomous. Needless to say, my teacher screamed at me. I also almost picked up a conefish. I didn't realize what it was. I should stop trying to pick up unusual animals. I was 17 and had unprotected sex with a hooker for $75. I hope you got tested. Yes. I have HPV. My family and I swung on a sketchy rope swing and jumped in a lake in Tennessee. After about 20 minutes, we saw a little white cross next to the rope that said Chris, 2012. We stopped swinging at that point. Edit, it was definitely a rope swing, since it had a wooden platform at the bottom to stand on. Also, I understand he may not have died on the rope swing, but we had already almost gotten hurt a few times, so seeing the potential just sealed the deal for us. As for the lake, I honestly have no idea where it was. We were staying at Standing Stones, but the lake wasn't in the park. Was this by a bridge to Terabithia by any chance? As an 8-year-old I yelled at a huge dog who was chasing my bike. He had bitten my neighbor's son the day before. I got off my bike and basically screamed, "No! Bad dog!" while staring this behemoth Labrador down. The dog tucked his tail between his legs and sulked off. I guided him back to his home and told his owners what happened. The dog even let me pet him. As for why I went and pet a dog who just chased me, I don't know. We had a truce the remainder of the dog's life. He hated most strangers but didn't charge me or my little pink bicycle anymore and still let me pet him from time to time. The real issue is what kind of people let their dog who has just bitten someone run around. When I was about 10 I used a metal knife to dig a piece of bread out of my toaster while it was still plugged in, nearly turned it on when my hand slipped. I was putting new bulbs above the sink the other day, the lights were on and I could see cobwebs in the empty of 3 sockets. So I grab a wet fork and just as I'm an inch from sticking it into the socket to clean out the webs I stop and stare at what I'm about to do. After a few, very long seconds I flick the switch off and use the fork to clean it. It really made me question, though, how retarded I really am. I have been whitewater rafting multiple times, and fallen out multiple times, and it wasn't until I went on the gully and fell out at the top of the longest rapid. Never thought I was about to die until that point and it shook me up for the rest of the day. Now I realize I wasn't likely to drown, wearing a PFD, but during the ride on the rapid I could not keep my head above water and I was pretty damn concerned. I would have received 230 volts out of a main socket if my parents hadn't walked in. I was about 7, and had just read the horrible science book on electricity. I was planning on using a fork to light a bulb from the mains, to see how electricity worked and lit things up. In my mind, I was perfectly safe, because I was wearing rubber gloves, and rubber-soled shoes. The concept of earthing oneself was learned via yelling that day. Edit, for those asking why I would have died if I was wearing rubber gloves, I was wearing flimsy surgical gloves and those awful plastic sandals that were, for reasons beyond my understanding, popular in the 90s. I definitely would have died. Finished scuba diving school, then went on a plane within 24 hours of my last dive. When the plane took off and started the ascent, I realized the mistake I made and started panicking in my head. Ended up being okay. How's the prosthetic leg? One time I was crossing a major road with 2 lanes in each direction and realized immediately after making it across that I didn't even glance to see if any traffic was coming. I almost kill people like you every week. Me too. Not in traffic though, I follow them home and then really think about it for a while. I am legally blind. I have some vision but not much, but anyway, I was at a friend's party one night and one of our mutual friends brought one of their friends, but none of us have ever met before, and everything was good up until he had too much to drink, and I guess he got mad at me for some reason and he says to me, "I could kill you right now," and he puts what I assumed to be his finger against my face. Now remember, we had both been drinking, so me being the smartass that I am said, "If you don't get that off my face I'll bite it off." He kind of chuckles, removes it and leaves the party. It wasn't until after he left then I found out what it was. He had actually put a gun to my head. Anyone who wasn't trashed probably thought you were the most hardcore mother ducker. Myself and 3 friends bought an inflatable dinghy and paddled across a river using only 4 spades as oars. We later realized we had gone directly through a ducking shipping lane. Whoops. Similar thing happened to my cousin at around the same age. She ate a whole load of laburnum seeds because she thought they were peas. I used to play this game where one person would have a bow, as in a serious, kill you if you get hit with it kind of bow, and shoot an arrow straight up in the air with everyone standing around them in a circle. Everyone would then scatter and try to find cover. If you got hit you lost, obviously. That was pretty stupid, I guess. Did you invent silent Velcro? I was 9 and put the vacuum hose up to my mouth to try to get all the air out of my lungs. I'd what I thought would happen. Many years ago I was ducked up on a cocktail of pills and rolling/tripping pretty hard. I was on some railroad tracks with a friend late one night when we saw a train coming from way off in the distance. In my current state I thought it would be a wonderful idea if I just ran in the same direction the train was going and jumped right before it got to me so I could ride the front of the train while I was high. My friend yanked me off the tracks just before the train got to us and I sort of snapped out of it. When I was a kid, I was on vacation with my family at the beach. There was a pretty big storm, but when it ended I went swimming with a friend. The tide was so strong that we were being thrown under and carried down the beach, but we didn't realize it at the time. It just seemed like fun to us at the time, but we seriously could have drowned. Sticking a small piece of plastic, clothing label thingy, I found on the floor in my eye as a kid because I saw my uncle put in his lenses once and figured that's what grown-ups do. Doctor had to take it out but luckily my eye was fine. Bees? I used to always use a fork to take out the bread when it got stuck in the toaster. I never realized how dangerous it was until my teens. From before when I quit smoking. I wanted to light my cigarette but lighter didn't work, ran out of fuel, all it did was create sparks, and didn't have matches. So I took my deodorant and sprayed it on the sink and made spark with my lighter and made some fire. Lowered my face to light the cigarette and the fire had quickly spread to the part where I guess substantial amount of deo was present. The flame became huge suddenly and it burned a small part of my right eyelashes. Could have lost an eye. Accepting rides from strange men. As a lone teenage girl, that was dumb AF. Now that I look back, I always sorta justified it. It was torrentially raining and a man offered me a ride home from the orthodontist's. Well, I don't wanna get wet, do I? Or my friends and I crossed wires and they thought I went home with my sister from the club and a random guy offers to drive me home. Nothing ever happened though, thankfully. If I ever have a daughter I hope she's not dumb AF like I was. Edit. This is also in a developing country where cabs aren't that frequent or reliable and at a time when many teenagers didn't have cell phones. I jumped into a pretty strong river before checking to see what was downstream. Around a nearby bend there was a 7 to 8 foot waterfall into a shallow pool. Miraculously I landed in a part that was chest high whereas the rest was knee high. I probably would have been fine but I was a 2-hour strenuous hike away from civilization, so it could have been a very bad day. Driving drunk. I know it's a common stupid thing that people do, but I drove home and woke up at 7 a.m. on my kitchen floor with my roommate kicking me. I still think about how ducking lucky it was that I didn't hurt or kill someone. I have never ever driven even with 1 beer in me since, and that was 10 years ago. Thanks for that. Plenty of people in that situation would have continued to drive drunk since they didn't hurt anyone or themselves that one time. Not me, but my dad did this. My dad's friend's scooter broke down in middle of nowhere at night. He and my dad opened the fuel cap, lit a matchstick on top of it to see if there is fuel in the tank. They concluded that lack of fuel didn't cause the problem. This happened when they were 16-17-ish. They used to sell this cleaner stuff for clothes irons that came in a spray can. This stuff was flammable as duck, but the irons never got hot enough to ignite it. My grandpa had 3 cans of this stuff. Me and my idiot brothers emptied them into a gas can, and started carefully cutting into shotgun shells to get the powder. We mixed enough powder and cleaner to get this thick mud-like substance, and cut the thickness with some gasoline, so we could pour it into a set of prepared toilet paper rolls. The rolls were prepared with duct tape, so they wouldn't leak. Once the rolls were full, we stuck firecrackers into the mud, and taped over them with the fuse sticking out, to later light them and see how big a bang they'd make. Our dad found them, there were 3 or 4 of them, and asked us what was in them. He looked worried as hell, so we fessed up. I'll never forget the look on his face as we listed off the ingredients to these things. His eyes almost fell out onto his cheeks by the time we'd gotten to the gasoline. He turned them over to the county sheriff's department for disposal, and was later informed that, if we'd set even one of them off, whoever lit the firecracker would have likely lost an arm, or been killed. Any witnesses would have been deafened, and seriously injured by the shrapnel. We were never punished for this, even though we deserved it. Honestly, the look of dawning terror on my dad's face was punishment enough. Thanks for listening to another episode of Reddit X. Subscribe and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any stories. Feel free to share your own stories below in the comments. Have a good day.